Hey, one thing that I thought would be fun and hopefully profitable to do would be to make a follow-up video to my last jazzification video. In the last video called the jazzification process, how I jazzify songs or something along those lines, I was pretty much talking about what goes through my head when I jazzify a song. And I figured it would be fun to, in this video, actually walk through a whole song with you. Now, I'll tell you up front, this video does kind of presuppose that you've seen the prior video. In the last video, I kind of talked more about the theory behind jazz and which components of, which core components of jazz I tend to use in jazzifying a song. So I talked about a lot more of that in the last video. In this video, I'm just kind of gonna dive right into the song and tell you what I'm doing and why. And I'll explain a few brief things along the way, but it does kind of presuppose you've seen the last one. But diving right in, the song that I thought would be fun to use in walking through a whole song, how I jazzify with you, was the song You've Got a Friend in Me from Toy Story. Now this song, I'll tell you the normal chords, that way I can tell you how I'm adjusting them when I jazzify it. The normal chords to this song are kind of just jumping into the first verse. I'm going to skip it. There's like an intro section, but I'm just going to dive into the first verse. There's a C major chord, G augmented, another C, a C7, F major chord, an F sharp diminished 7th, C, C7, F, C, E7, A minor, F, C, E7, A minor again. Repeats itself another time. F, C, E7, A minor. And then here, D7, G, C, A7, D7, G, C. And then it jumps into a little instrumental bit. But the thing I like about this song is that, well, the chords are the same in the first verse as they are the second and the third, so we don't have to go through all the chords because that would just be tedious, and we can talk about one verse and it essentially applies to most of the song. So those are the normal unjazzified chords, and I'll kind of play you the song, kind of sing along with it in a non-jazzified format. I might make a few hiccups because I'm usually used to playing in the jazzified way, but hopefully it goes all right. So kind of jumping right in, I'm gonna skip the intro. You've got a friend in me. You've got a friend in me. When the road looks rough ahead and you're miles and miles from your nice warm bed, you just remember what your old pal said, boy. You've got a friend in me. You've got a friend in me. Now that's, for the most part, a non-jazzified version. I kind of was adjusting some fingers here and there. I'm just used to playing the jazzified version. But anyways, I'm going to tell you how I convert from that version, which already has a lot of sevenths in there already, which is kind of nice, to the jazzified version. So kind of reminding you a little bit from the last video, out of all the core characteristics and key components that have characterized jazz throughout the many eras of jazz, the three components that I like to take and use to jazzify non-jazz songs are extended chords, dissonance, and some jazzy, usually bluesy soloing. So in this piece, I would typically make everything at least a seventh. So all the C major chords become C major sevenths, all the minor chords will become minor sevenths, so on and so forth. There are already a decent few diminished sevenths and dominant sevenths in there, so some of the works are already done, I guess, if you want to call it that. That's one thing that I like to do. Another thing I like to do is I like to add a certain level of dissonance. Now, not too much because you don't want to make the piece unrecognizable, but enough dissonance to kind of give that jazzy flair. So what that looks like after I've converted pretty much all the chords into sevenths versions of themselves, I'll either do stuff like I'll drop the fifth note of a major seventh a half step, make it essentially a raised fourth, a Lydian chord. I might drop a dominant seventh, fifth note a half step. Maybe I'll make a minor seventh into a minor major seventh, or maybe make it a dominant seventh, so on and so forth. Just kind of add some dissonance here and there. Maybe kind of tweak certain notes by half steps up and down. That's the second thing I like to do. And the third thing I like to do is find nice spots to put some nice jazzy solos to them. I usually like to use blues scales for that because I like the blues. It's a nice key component in the history of jazz, you know, what's helped contribute to the genre. So that's kind of just up front what I like to do. So kind of telling you how I'm adjusting these chords. The initial C chord, I'll just play with one hand. C chord, I'll turn into a C major 7th. The G augmented, I'll turn into a G7. And then this next C chord, also a C major 7. Then there's a C7 already. I don't need to modify that one. I'll turn the F into an F major 7. The F diminished 7, the F sharp diminished 7th, excuse me. I'll leave that one alone. I'll turn the C into a C major 7. I'll leave the C7 alone. Turn the F into an F major 7, the C into a C major 7, the E7, I'll leave that alone. And then the A minor, I'll turn to an A minor 7. And those four chord pattern, F, C, E7, A minor, that kind of repeats for the next 3 lines. I'll just do the same thing, turn them all into 7ths versions of themselves at a bass line. And then the last 2 bits of this verse, D7 I'll leave alone, G7, well, I'll turn the G into a G7, C into a C major 7, A7 I'll leave alone, D7 I'll leave alone, G into a G7, then a C into a C major 7. Those are how I tweak the chords up front. The bass line, like I said, I tend to make them all extended chords. So that's the most predictable thing I'll tell you that I'll do. Also on this little instrumental beat, I will likely insert I will insert a jazzy solo, a bluesy solo. This key is predominantly in the key of C, so I'll probably go with in a key of, I use an A blues scale. I'll solo a blues scale during the instrumental bit here after the first verse. There's another instrumental bit at the end. I'll also put it there. I like to find nice spots to put in those jazzy solos, and instrumental bits just kind of lend themselves to it. So those are the most predictable upfront things I can tell you that I'll do to modify, to jazzify this song. All the chords become 7ths versions of themselves. If the chord's already a 7th, I just kind of leave it alone. Then I'll find spots to put in the jazzy solos. Here I'm putting it in the instrumental section after the first verse and after the third verse at the end. And now the last bit, or the other component that I have not already talked about, or that I talked about but I didn't tell you how I'm going to tweak these chords, is the dissonant part. Now the dissonance part, like making major 7ths into Lydian chords by dropping the 5th note a half step, or doing the same on dominant 7ths, or making a minor chord like a minor major 7th. For example, if I make the A minor 7th here, I might make it when I'm messing around, an A minor major 7th, or maybe I'll make it a A7 proper. That part, the dissonance part, is pretty spontaneous for me. When I'm playing through the chords at a bass line, making everything 7ths, and kind of knowing where I'm going to add in some jazzy solos. When I tweak the chords to add extra level of dissonance, I don't pre-plan that. I just kind of feel out the song, and I'm like, oh, I want to add some dissonance here, or maybe I want to tweak this a little bit, and I'll kind of, subconsciously tweak the chords. So I can't really tell you when I do that. That's pretty spontaneous, but for sure, everything I've told you in terms of jazzy solos and making everything 7th, that's all planned up front. So that's kind of how I will jazzify this song, and I'll play this first verse in a jazzified format for you. I'm just going to skip the intro and jump right in, okay? You've got a friend in me. You've got a friend in me. When the road looks rough ahead and you're miles and miles from your nice warm bed, you just remember what your old pal said, boy. You've got a friend in me. You've got a friend in me. So what I did there, like I said, I made everything 7ths, and along the way, maybe you could hear it, maybe not, but I tweaked some chords on some of the major 7ths. I dropped the 5ths a half step. I made one of the A minors a minor major 7th. On some of them, I just completely changed the root note, a couple half steps away, not just one half step. And like I said, that's the more spontaneous part. I can't really tell you when I'm going to do that. I just do it without thinking about it. I just kind of subconsciously feel it out and add that in. And so at the end of the piece, you know, I'll do the last bit of the verse again. Yeah, you've got a friend in me. And then here's where I'll solo. And I jump to the next verse. You've got a friend in me. So kind of nice little bluesy solo there. And what I did in the first verse, those same chords are used in the second and the third verses respectively. So pretty much the same process, you know. Everything's at least a seventh, and then I'll add some dissonance by tweaking chords. That happens a little bit more naturally without me thinking about it too much. And then there's the bridge here. I'll walk through the bridge with you because that's the only one with separate chords. The bridge's normal chords are F, B, C, B7, C, B, B7. I think I messed up. Anyways, F, B, C, B7, C, B, B7, and then E minor, A7, D minor, and G. Those are the normal chords for the bridge, and how I would jazzify it, I turn them again all into, at the minimum, sevenths chord, so the F would become an F major 7, B will become a B7, C major 7, another B7, C major 7, B7. There's already a B7 here, I'm just going to retain it. E minor becomes an E minor 7, A7 I leave alone, D minor becomes a D minor 7, and then G becomes a G major 7. So I'll play through that for you in a jazzy way. Jazzy way, right? I always kind of mitigate how jazzy you make it because you don't want to make it unrecognizable. But now some other folks might be a little bit smarter than I am, bigger and stronger too, maybe, but none of them will ever love you the way I do. It's me and you, boy. So didn't tweak it too much. I made that last minor chord of the D minor 7, I made it a minor major 7th. After I played the initial minor 7, I then went up the 7th a half step. So that's how I just kind of tweaked that one. But pretty much that's all the chords. To kind of sum it up again for you in the end, the three things that I like to do, the three jazz characteristics I like to bring to non-jazzy songs and jazzify them, are making everything at least a 7th. If a chord's already a 7th, I leave it alone typically. Adding some dissonance in, like making major 7ths a Lydian chords, but dropping the 5th note a half step, or maybe dropping the 5th note a half step on dominant 7ths and tweaking like minor major 7ths, or minor 7ths turning them into minor major 7ths, or dominant 7ths. And sometimes I'll just tweak notes half steps up and down. That's the dissonance side that happens a bit more subconsciously. And the third thing I like to add in is jazzy solos. And I'll do a full version of this, like I'll upload it separately. Either I will upload it first, before or after this, I'm not so sure which one, but it will go up and you can see kind of the finished product there. But that's kind of how I jazzify this song. I hope this has been profitable and to some degree educational for you if you're not too familiar with the subject. If you are familiar with jazzifying songs and you have your own way of doing it, I would love to hear it in the comments. So thank you guys for watching. Have a good rest of your day.